Hey, welcome back to our next video in this Microvellum Toolbox training series. Again, I'm RJ, and in this one, I'm going to be showing you how to use AutoCAD. I know it's supposed to be a Toolbox training series, right? But really to get the most out of Toolbox, you got to know at least a little bit of AutoCAD. Now, we're not going to get into anything too complicated, just keeping it simple with some of the things that you'll be using on a regular basis. So we're going to start off just learning how to use some of the basic commands and how to put those together to create a simple drawing. So if you're ready, let's get into this and start learning. Okay, so now we're back inside of Toolbox. Now something that you're going to have to be getting used to throughout all these videos is creating a new project. So let's start off this next one by doing just that. Let's go back into our project viewer. We'll go to the same category we already created, MVU Apprentice Series, and add a new project. Now this one we'll call MVU AutoCAD Job 2. Now those underscores are not necessary. If you don't want to add those, you don't need to. And now hit OK. And here are the project properties again. And because we're not working with any of our products or anything else within Toolbox, we don't need to go into our project wizard or any of those other settings. We'll just stay in this project properties tab and just enter a job description and a job number. And again, we're just creating that habit so we can get used to putting something in here and starting our projects off the right way. Okay, now it's time to add a new room. So back to the Microvellum palette, select a new room. Now right click on that project. And here's the menu. We can now add a new room. Let's name this one Basic Training. So just a quick side note before we get into this. As you start messing around with AutoCAD a little bit more and maybe get a little adventurous and start playing around with some more of those commands on your ribbon, right above that, you'll notice a drop-down list, which is our workspaces. Now, you don't need to change your workspace, and I suggest you don't. But just in case something happens and your Microvellum palette disappears, it's not going to be as easy as just going back and undoing what you did. But not to worry, there is a simple command to bring that palette back. So make a note of this, write this down somewhere. The command is MVTB7. So basically Microvellum Toolbox 7, type in MVTB7 in the command line, hit enter, and there we go. Now we got our Microvellum palette back. Now back to the drawing. First are these dots in model space when you open up a new room. Now remember, this is coming in from the drawing template, so whatever's in that template will be here when you add new rooms to your projects. Now these dots are actually a polyline. And a polyline is basically just a line, but somewhat different, which we're going to learn about in a second. And they're dots because the properties of the line type has changed. Now they're here just for a reference. The corner is placed at 0, 0, 0, which are the X, Y, and Z coordinates. We'll talk more about coordinates later on in training. For now, you just need to know that when you're in this view, X is running from left to right, Y is running up and down, and Z only matters when working in a 3D view. Now let's talk about selecting objects in AutoCAD. So there are a few different ways that you can do this. First off, you can just left click and select it, then right click, and that'll open up this menu, and that's how you can show the properties of the object. And the other way is drawing a window around your objects. Hit escape on the keyboard to cancel. And now starting with your cursor to the left side of this polyline, left click on your mouse, and no need to hold it, just left click and let go. And that starts this window. From there, drag your cursor over to the right, and you can see this blue window appear. And left click again to end it. If you want this polyline to be selected, the whole thing needs to be inside of this blue window. Now move the cursor to the right side of the polyline. Same thing, left click on your mouse, let go, and drag the cursor from right to left. And the difference with this is that now you only need to have this window cover up part of that object. So as soon as it touches that first dot, you'll notice that the whole polyline's highlighted and it's ready to be selected. And the last way I want to show you to select objects is by using a lasso, which honestly I rarely use, but it's in here, so I might as well show it to you. Now the only difference with this compared to just using your regular window is instead of just left clicking on the mouse and letting go to start the window, is left click on your mouse and hold it down and now drag your cursor. From left to right, still the same blue window or now blue lasso appears. Same rules apply as before. And when moving from right to left, you have a green lasso. Now back to polylines and lines. Let's draw one of each so you can learn the difference between the two. So let's type in L. You'll notice that brings up a preview of the different commands in AutoCAD. Now you can just hit enter or select that command in the preview. And so now we need to specify that first point in model space where we're going to place this line. Left click on your mouse below the dotted polyline. And now you can see moving your cursor around, you can stop this line at any point. But we want to make sure that it's going to go perfectly straight in our x-axis. So to do that, we need to turn on our ortho. Go down to the status bar, left click to turn that on. And now going back to our line and moving the cursor in any direction, you can now see the difference between when ortho is on and when it's off. Okay, that looks good there. Left click again on your mouse and hit enter to finish this line. Now right below that, we're going to draw a polyline. PL in the command line, hit enter, and same thing, left click in model space to start this polyline. Now left click again for the ending point and enter to finish. Now when we use the AutoCAD commands throughout these exercises, most of them are going to be done through the command line using keyboard shortcuts. That's just the way that it works. It's what I'm used to. But if you're more of a point and click person, you can also find the same drawing and modifying commands in the AutoCAD ribbon. First thing I want to do is select both of these objects. So do that, and you can see visually right away the grip points in the center of these objects are different. So the line is just a line. You don't really have anything else that you can do with it except maybe drag it around, move it in different directions by grabbing those grip points. You can do the same thing with the polyline, but you also have some other options when you hover over that center grip point. Now you have this menu appear. Let's go ahead and left click on Convert to Arc. And just a few things that you can do with this arc now. You can modify it by moving those grip points. And so this is something that's different than working with just a line. So if you made a couple edits to your polyline and it's not the way that you originally drew it, I want you to use this next command to bring it back to the way that we first had it drawn. So this one is called undo. Just U for the shortcut, enter. And you can just keep hitting enter as many times as you want, and it'll keep going back and undoing anything that you've done before. So similar to Windows and other things, undo or Control Z is also the same thing. So if you wanted to Control Z, but for me, I think U is a lot easier. So hopefully that helps understanding the differences between a polyline and a line. Now, the next thing I want to talk about are snap points and the other thing that we see on our status bar next to ortho, which is polar tracking. So to do that, why don't we start by drawing a construction line? And a construction line is an infinite line in model space. So it could run in any direction and it doesn't have any start or stop point. Okay, type XL in the command line. And now we need to pick a starting point. So we're going to use a snap point that's on this polyline. Snap points are going to show up green. So as you hover your mouse over this polyline, you'll see the end point, which is a snap point, appear. And then this green triangle, which is the midpoint. And that's where we're going to start this construction line. So left click on that midpoint. And more on snap points in just a second. Now we got our starting point. With ortho on, I can just pull the mouse down in the Y direction. Then I can have a straight construction line in Y. But I don't want to do that yet. I want to turn the ortho off. Now you can see as we rotate around these objects, we have the option to place this construction line at any angle. Still not selecting anything on our mouse yet. Going back down to the status bar. Now select next to ortho, polar tracking. Now polar tracking and ortho can't be on at the same time. So you'll notice as you turn one on, the other one turns off. Now that we got polar tracking on, do the same thing, rotate around those objects. You'll see a green dashed line appear when your cursor reaches a specific angle. So once it hits that angle, if you were to again left click on your mouse, that's going to be the angle of your line. But just keep rotating around and you can see what I mean as it goes from 45 to 90 and all the way around that circle. Now as we get back to the top, left click on our mouse. And you can keep repeating this as many times as you want. So again, just moving the mouse in any direction, left clicking, and left clicking one more time. Give ourselves 3 construction lines and hit enter to finish. Okay, so now back to the object snap settings. You go to the status bar again. Here you have the option to turn on or off that object snap. You can see in that help text, F3 is the shortcut for that. Next to that is a drop-down menu, and this is a preview of all the current snap modes that you have on. Select Object Snap Settings. And now this takes you into our drafting settings window, where again, you have the option to turn it on or off and also control some of those snap modes. So it's a good idea to come in here and just get familiar with the different snap modes, turn some off and on, and just get used to how you're snapping to specific points on your objects. So now let's get rid of these things on our screen and start with this drawing exercise. So select your objects. You can see from left to right isn't going to work because we have those construction lines. So we're going to have to use a window from right to left, or just select those objects, and you can hit delete on the keyboard or type in E for erase, which is the AutoCAD erase command. They both do the same thing. I prefer to use the shortcut commands on the keyboard, so you'll typically hear me say just type in E for an AutoCAD erase. And then one more thing before we start this exercise, I wanted to point out you do have an option to make the right click on your mouse the button for enter. So instead of typing in a command and then hitting enter or spacebar on your keyboard, you can type in that command and then right click on your mouse, and it'll also act as if you were hitting enter. That would be under the same drafting settings window. And this time you would go under user preferences tab and right click customization. And you can see at the bottom of the screen, you would turn that button on to make right click mean enter. So yeah, when you see that yellow ring show up during these videos, that's me just right clicking on the mouse, which is entering to complete these commands. All right, so now it's time to start drawing something. So I figured the best way to do this and to get most familiar with putting all these common commands together is by drawing something like Pac-Man. It's a really simple drawing that we can do. I just cropped this little section, so this is what we're going to create. I'm going to start off with a small rectangle. This will be the home for our ghosts. Type in REC in the command line and hit enter. Now it's asking to pick a point in model space. So select the first point by left clicking on your mouse. And now moving the cursor to the right. Don't select another point yet. You can see how we have the two values that appear when we're drawing this rectangle. Now, if you don't see these two values showing up, it's because your dynamic input is not enabled. So be sure to enable that. And so what we can do here is we can type in a value to determine the size of this rectangle. So let's type in 60. That'll be our value in X. Hit tab. Now type in 25, hit enter, and that's the value in Y. And again, I'm sorry if you're using a metric library. I know if your drawing units are set up in metric, then yeah, this rectangle is going to be pretty small. But for the sake of this exercise, let's just go ahead and continue using these values. And I guess just zoom in real close. It's all going to be the same, right? So now we need to draw a polyline around this smaller rectangle. Type in PL in the command line, hit enter. Now to select the starting point, left click outside of that smaller rectangle. Let's make sure our ortho's on. And then moving our cursor to the right, we're going to give it a value of 100. Now hit enter. Move your cursor down in Y, another value of 100. Now to the left, 100 again. And now to close this polyline, you can type in C, hit enter, and now we have a closed polyline. So one thing I wanted to point out during this exercise, you'll notice that when we're drawing, we're going to be drawing from left to right. So just like that polyline, we started from the left and then went around a circle in a clockwise direction. And that's just something to keep in mind through this exercise and also when working in Toolbox. So now we got the smaller rectangle and the polyline around it. It's time to move that polyline into position. We're going to use the AutoCAD move command for this. Type in M for move, hit enter. Now it's asking to select your object. So now with that pick box, select that polyline by left clicking on your mouse, hit enter, or right click if you set that up. And now you need to pick a base point. The base point on this polyline is going to be the midpoint at the top of that object. So find that green triangle snap point, and left click on that. And now you're ready to move this polyline into the right spot. And that's going to be the midpoint at the top of the small rectangle. And again, just find that green triangle representing the midpoint, left clicking, and that's how we move that polyline. And another way to move something is by selecting the object, picking a base point, and then moving the cursor in the direction that you want the object to move and giving it a value. So again, type M for move in the command line, hit enter, select the polyline again. Now this base point, we're not going to select on the actual polyline. We're just going to select outside of it, left click on the space outside. And because we're going to enter a specific value, the base point that we're picking isn't critical. Now it's asking for the second point of displacement. Instead of selecting anything on the screen, move the cursor up, and now we can enter a value, and the object is going to move in that direction. So the value is going to be 35, hit enter. Now we should have that smaller rectangle centered inside of our polyline. Okay, so hopefully you're following along and picking this stuff up. If not, no worries, it's all good. Just go ahead and pause the video now and take a little bit of time to get yourself caught up and get your drawing up to this point. Once you get it looking like I have on the screen here, continue moving forward and getting Pac-Man drawn. The next couple commands that we're going to get into are going to be the offset and the trim command. First, with the offset command. Again, just a keyboard shortcut, so we're going to type in O for offset, hit enter, and now you're going to type in the amount that you want to offset this line. So let's type in 2, hit enter again. Now the pick box appears and you're ready to select an object. We're going to select that smaller rectangle, left click on your mouse, and now if you move your cursor to the outside, it'll offset that rectangle by 2 inches. And if you move it to the inside, it'll offset it in 2 inches. We're going to go to the outside, left click on your mouse, and hit enter. Now we're just going to repeat that command. And to repeat commands in AutoCAD, you can just hit that space bar on your keyboard, and it remembers the last command that you had, and we're ready to offset again. So once that offset command is active, we're not going to keep the same value. We're going to change it by typing in 6. Now the pick box appears. We're going to select that polyline. Now moving your cursor again to the outside of that, left clicking in space and hitting enter to complete that offset. So we got our shapes that are getting close to the Pac-Man maze, but we need to trim it up to make it look a little bit more like that picture that we showed at the beginning. So to do that, we need to add a few polylines. I'm sure you remember the command for a polyline. Type in PL, hit enter, and just follow along, and snapping to endpoints, we're going to start our polyline there. And the polyline doesn't have to be a specific length, it just needs to go through that outer polyline. Just continue going around the drawing, some of those polylines at endpoints and the 2 horizontals at the midpoint. Now we're almost ready to trim, but we got to move those horizontal polylines. Now you can do this the slow way by selecting one object at a time and grabbing the center grip point and moving it with your mouse, but that's not very efficient. So with the AutoCAD move command, we can type in M for move and select as many objects as we want and move them all at the same time. So I'm going to select the first polyline and then the second one, hit enter. Now it's time for the base point. And again, because I want to give this a specific value, the base point isn't critical. So just left click next to that polyline, move your cursor up in Y. Let's move this up 9 inches and hit enter. And I lied, we're not ready to trim yet. We need to go back and repeat that offset command. So O for offset, hit enter. And now for the amount that we want to offset by, it remembered the last one of 6, so we need to change that. Let's type in 18, hit enter. And we're going to offset the 2 horizontal lines. So select the first one. And because that pick box is still appearing, we can continue going around this drawing and offsetting more objects. So now to the left, select the other horizontal polyline, offset that one down 18 inches. Okay, and now we're ready to trim this up. So like I mentioned before, we're using all these keyboard shortcuts, but trim can also be found under the Modify button in the AutoCAD ribbon. So if you want to use that, go right ahead. If not, type in TR for trim, hit enter. You can pick on an object and just trim that by left-clicking on your mouse and letting go. We'll go around the 4 corners and trim that up. Then hit enter once you're all done. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. We still need to trim up some of these polylines, but to give us exactly what we need, let's use the extend command. So we can now extend these vertical polylines to that outer border. EX is the command for this one. Type in EX, hit enter. Now you can see just by hovering over that line and before you left click on your mouse, it gives you a little preview of what it's going to do. So yeah, if you like that, left click, and let's extend each end of those polylines. So once you select the first one, you can just keep going around a circle and selecting the next one, left clicking on your mouse, and when you're done, hit enter. There we go, that looks good. Let's get back into the trim command. So like we did before, we can select on an object just by left clicking on it and letting go. But another way to do it is by holding that left button on your mouse and dragging your cursor in the direction you want it to trim. So it's kind of like creating a path. So you're holding down that button, moving your mouse around, and then whatever path that you're creating is how you're going to trim up these objects. Okay, and that's how you trim up some of those unwanted objects in your drawing. As you're looking at your screen, if this is what it looks like, then great, we're on the right track. If not, let's go ahead and back up and repeat some of those steps so you can get to this point of the drawing. And then we're going to continue moving forward, drawing some more rectangles, moving more objects around, and also learning about the copy command. Now, obviously, you can't be expected to remember everything that you just learned by watching this video just once. I mean, it does require doing some practice. So I would suggest coming back into these videos and watching them again and just continuing that practice and repetition. Yeah, I know I'm talking about practice, but practice is key. Practice is going to be the way that you're going to continue to get better at working with Toolbox. So now I think it's a good time for us to take a little break and pause the video, stretch our legs, and go get some water, and then we'll pick back up where we left off. So until then, be good, and I'll meet you back here to finish up the rest of this drawing.